Deep in the Gothic city of Yharnam lies a truth so terrible that it has been hidden behind veils of ignorance, concealed by the sacrifices of scholars, and protected by the very fabric of reality itself. To understand Bloodborne is to peer beyond the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about the nature of existence, to witness the cosmos as it truly is, cold and indifferent, populated by beings whose motives are as alien as their forms. The story begins, as so many tragedies do, with good intentions, with the pursuit of knowledge, with the desperate hope that humanity might transcend its limitations and achieve something greater. You arrive in Yharnam as an outsider, a stranger seeking what this city has become famous for, a miraculous medical treatment known as blood ministration. The rumors speak of a cure for any ailment, of blood so potent it can heal the sick and strengthen the weak. You've traveled far to reach this place, and as you enter a clinic in the cathedral ward, you're greeted by an old man who promises to administer this wondrous treatment. You sign a contract in blood. The old man begins the transfusion, and as the strange, thick blood enters your veins, you feel consciousness slipping away. When you open your eyes, you're no longer in the clinic. You find yourself in what appears to be an operating theater, but the space feels wrong, dreamlike. A hunched creature emerges from a pool of blood on the floor, its body a grotesque fusion of beast and man, and it advances toward you with terrible purpose. You have no weapon, no means to defend yourself, and as its claws tear into you, you die. But death is not the end. You awaken in a place called the Hunter's Dream, a strange pocket dimension filled with flowers and lit by an eternal twilight. An old man in a wheelchair greets you. His name is Gehrman, and he tells you that you are now a hunter, bound to this dream, tasked with slaying the beasts that plague Yharnam. Beside him stands a doll, tall and porcelain-like, who speaks in gentle tones and offers to help you grow stronger. You don't understand what's happening, but you return to the waking world and the hunt begins. The streets of Yharnam tell a story of their own. This was once a prosperous city, its architecture a testament to wealth and learning. Gothic spires reach toward the sky, ornate lampposts line the cobblestone streets, and everywhere you look, you see the trappings of a civilization that believed itself enlightened. But that civilization is dying. The citizens of Yharnam cower behind locked doors and barricaded windows. Some shout warnings at you, telling you to leave, to flee while you still can. Others have lost their minds entirely, attacking anything that moves with makeshift weapons and feral desperation. And then there are the beasts, massive twisted creatures that were once human, their bodies warped into nightmarish forms covered in matted fur and protruding bones. They roam the streets in packs, driven by an insatiable hunger for blood and flesh. As you venture deeper into the city, patterns begin to emerge. You find notes left by previous hunters, cryptic messages that speak of blood, of eyes, of things that humanity was never meant to see. You encounter NPCs, survivors who offer fragments of information. An old hunter named Jura guards the ruins of old Yharnam, begging you not to harm the beasts there, for they were once citizens, people he knew and failed to protect. A woman named Ariana offers you her blood, a gift that will sustain you on your journey. Eileen the Crow, a hunter of hunters, warns you about the madness that comes from the hunt itself, the way the thrill of violence can consume even the most noble warrior. Each conversation, each item description, each environmental detail adds another piece to a puzzle that spans millennia. To truly understand Bloodborne's story, we must go back, far back, to a time before Yharnam, before the Healing Church, before humanity even knew the Great Ones existed. We must descend into the labyrinth beneath the city, into the chalice dungeons where the ancient Pthumerian civilization once thrived. The Pthumerians were a superhuman race, tall and powerful, with skin as pale as death, and eyes that glowed with arcane knowledge. They built vast underground cities, tombs and temples that stretched deep into the earth. And in these depths, they made contact with beings from beyond the stars, entities that existed on planes of reality humans could barely comprehend. These beings came to be known as the Great Ones. The Great Ones are not gods in any traditional sense. They don't demand worship or offer blessings. They exist across multiple dimensions, their true forms too vast and too alien for human minds to fully process. To look upon a Great One without the proper preparation, without enough insight, is to risk madness. Their motivations are opaque, operating on a logic that defies human understanding. Yet, for all their cosmic power, they share one tragic characteristic with humanity. Every Great One has lost its child and yearns for a surrogate. This fundamental truth drives much of Bloodborne's narrative. The Great Ones are sympathetic in nature, drawn to the desperate prayers of mortals, but their attempts to connect with humanity often lead to catastrophe. The Pthumerians learned to harvest blood from these Great Ones. In small doses, this old blood possessed miraculous properties. It could cure any disease, heal any wound, extend life far beyond its natural span. The Pthumerian queen, Yharnam, made a pact with a Great One to bear a child, and based on the formless nature of that child and the lore surrounding Eden, many scholars of the game believe this entity was the formless Great One known as Eden. She bore a child for this being, an infant Great One named Murgo. But something went horribly wrong. Murgo was stillborn, or perhaps torn from the queen's womb before its time. The child existed in a formless state, its cries echoing through the nightmare plains even though it had never truly lived. Queen Yharnam was left to wander eternally, her dress stained with blood, forever searching for her lost child. The old blood that had seemed such a blessing soon revealed its curse. The Pthumerians discovered that the blood didn't just heal, it transformed, it mutated. Those who partook too deeply began to change, their bodies twisting into bestial shapes. The scourge of the beast spread through their civilization like wildfire. Cities fell into ruin. The Pthumerians sealed themselves in their underground tombs, becoming undead guardians of the secrets they had uncovered, protecting the slumbering Great Ones and the truth of what humanity's curiosity had wrought. For untold ages, the Pthumerian labyrinth lay forgotten, buried beneath layers of earth and time. Humanity went on with its existence, building new civilizations in the lands above, unaware of the horrors that slept below. Then came Byrgenwerth. Founded by Master Willem, this institution of higher learning dedicated itself to archaeology and the pursuit of knowledge. The scholars of Byrgenwerth excavated the old Pthumerian ruins, and in doing so, they rediscovered the Great Ones and the old blood that had destroyed an entire civilization. Master Willem was no fool. He understood the danger the old blood represented. He had seen what it did to the Pthumerians, how it had reduced a mighty race to shambling beasts and restless undead. Willem believed that the path to transcendence, to elevating humanity to the level of the Great Ones, lay not in blood, but in eyes. "We are thinking on the basest of planes," Willem taught his students. "What we need are more eyes." He sought to line his brain with eyes, to achieve a state of cosmic awareness that would allow him to perceive reality as the Great Ones did. This philosophy would come to define Byrgenwerth's approach to research: cautious, cerebral, focused on gaining insight rather than physical power. But not all of Willem's students shared his caution. Lawrence, one of Willem's brightest pupils, became convinced that the old blood was the key to humanity's evolution. Where Willem saw danger, Lawrence saw opportunity. Where Willem preached restraint, Lawrence dreamed of action. The two men argued, their philosophical differences creating an unbridgeable rift. Lawrence would leave Byrgenwerth, and based on the connections we see throughout the game, it appears Gehrman and Mikolash were among those who departed during this period, though the exact details of who left remain unclear. Before he left, Lawrence made a promise to his teacher: fear the old blood. It was an oath he would break almost immediately. Before the schism became complete, the scholars of Bergenwerth made one final, terrible expedition. They traveled to a remote coastal village known as the fishing hamlet, where rumor spoke of a great one whose corpse had washed ashore. The being was called Kos, or as some say, Cosm, a great one who had been worshipped by the hamlet's inhabitants. The corpse of Kos lay on the beach, and within her rotting body, something moved. Her child, the orphan of Kos, gestated in death, sustained by forces beyond mortal comprehension. The scholars and hunters who came to the hamlet were not content merely to study. They defiled Kos's corpse, cutting it open to examine the orphan within. They harvested eyes from the hamlet's inhabitants, performing grotesque experiments in their search for cosmic knowledge. They slaughtered the villagers who tried to stop them, transforming the peaceful fishing community into an abattoir. Among those who participated in this massacre was Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, a noble hunter from Cainhurst who had trained under Gehrman. Maria was a skilled fighter, wielding her family's heirloom weapon, the rakuyo, with deadly grace. But she was also gentle of heart, and what she witnessed at the fishing hamlet broke something inside her. The screams of the dying villagers, the sacrilege committed against Kos, the gleam of madness in her fellow scholars' eyes as they carved up corpses in search of understanding. All of this filled Maria with such profound guilt that she could no longer continue. When the expedition returned, Maria threw her beloved rakuyo down a well, swearing never to hunt again. Based on what we find in the game, she appears to have spent time guarding the secrets in the Astral Clock Tower and showing what kindness she could to the patients being experimented upon in the research hall below, perhaps seeking some form of atonement for her role in the hamlet's destruction. The atrocities at the fishing hamlet did not go unpunished. The evidence throughout the DLC strongly suggests that Kos, whether in her final moments or perhaps beyond death itself, placed a curse upon the hunters. A nightmare was created, a twisted reflection of Yharnam where blood-drunk hunters would be trapped for eternity, forced to relive the hunt forever, never knowing rest or peace. This hunter's nightmare became a prison for those who had committed the worst sins, a purgatory drenched in blood and populated by the vengeful spirits of those who had died screaming. The orphan of Kos remained in this nightmare, its anguished cries calling out across dimensions, keeping the curse active, ensuring that the hunters would suffer as the hamlet had suffered. Back in the waking world, Lawrence moved forward with his plans. He came to the city of Yharnam and established the Healing Church, a religious organization built around the worship of the old blood and its miraculous properties. The Grand Cathedral became the church's seat of power, and blood ministration became its sacrament. At some point, the Healing Church made contact with a great one living in the depths beneath the cathedral. Her name was Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, and she was different from other great ones. Ebrietas seemed to genuinely desire communion with humanity. She was docile, almost friendly, and her blood proved ideal for the church's purposes. The Healing Church presented itself as a force for good, offering free blood healing to Yharnam's citizens. People came from all over the continent seeking cures for their ailments, and the church turned no one away. The city swelled with pilgrims and patients, all hoping to be saved by the miraculous blood. For a time, it seemed that Lawrence's vision would succeed. The blood healed the sick, strengthened the weak, and extended lives. The church grew wealthy and powerful, its influence spreading throughout Yharnam until it effectively became the city's government. But the church was not merely a charitable organization. It was also a research institution, conducting experiments that pushed the boundaries of ethics and sanity. The choir, the highest-ranking members of the Healing Church, communed directly with Ebrietas. They believed that by studying the Great Ones and experimenting with their blood, they could elevate humanity to a higher plane of existence. They conducted experiments on patients in the research hall, injecting them with various substances, trying to force their brains to develop eyes, to achieve that cosmic insight Master Willem had spoken of. Most of these experiments resulted in horrific mutations. The patients' heads swelled grotesquely, their skulls splitting to reveal bulging, malformed masses that might charitably be called eyes. Their bodies twisted and changed. Many died in agony. A few survived to become something new, the celestial emissaries and living failures, beings that were no longer quite human, but hadn't achieved true transcendence either. Parallel to the choir's efforts, another faction worked in the shadows. The school of Mensis, led by Mikolash, sought to contact the Great Ones through ritual rather than blood. They established themselves in the hidden village of Yahargul, far from the watchful eyes of the general public. Using one of the umbilical cords, the remnants of a Great One's birth, they performed a grand ritual to summon Murgo, the stillborn infant of Queen Yharnam. The ritual succeeded, but not in the way Mikolash had hoped. He and his followers were pulled into a nightmare, the nightmare of Mensis, where they became trapped forever. Mikolash went mad, his mind shattered by the cosmic truths he had glimpsed, running through endless hallways and babbling about eyes and coes. The ritual also had consequences for Yharnam itself, strengthening the connection between the waking world and the nightmare planes, accelerating the beast transformation in those who had partaken of the blood. Despite all the church's research and all of Lawrence's promises, the beast scourge could not be contained. Just as it had destroyed the Pthumerians millennia ago, the old blood began transforming Yharnam's citizens into beasts. At first, the transformations were rare, isolated incidents that could be covered up or dealt with quietly. But as more and more people received blood ministration, the problem grew exponentially worse. The church's solution was to create hunters, warriors specially trained and equipped to track down and kill the beasts before they could spread the contagion. And who better to lead this effort than Gehrman, the skilled fighter who had accompanied Lawrence from Birgenwerth. Gehrman established the first hunter's workshop and began training others in the art of the hunt. He was a brilliant craftsman, inventing the trick weapons that would become synonymous with hunting. These were transformable armaments, weapons that could shift between forms to adapt to different combat situations. The saw cleaver, the hunter axe, and Gehrman's own burial blade, a curved scythe that could extend to become a massive reaping weapon. Under Gehrman's tutelage, hunting became an art form, a dance of death performed with precision and skill. Among Gehrman's students was Lady Maria, a noble from Cainhurst. Gehrman admired her greatly, perhaps loved her, though his feelings had an obsessive quality that Maria either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Maria was everything a hunter should be, skilled, fearless, and noble. She moved with deadly grace, her rakuyo spinning in complex patterns that left her enemies dead before they understood what had happened. Despite being from Cainhurst, a land known for its blood magic, Maria refused to use such techniques. She considered blood arts to be base and degrading, preferring to rely on pure skill. Gehrman crafted weapons and clothing for his favorite student, creating the attire she wore with loving care. The hunters became Yharnam's heroes, celebrated for protecting the city from the beast threat. The night of the hunt became an institution, periodic purges when citizens would lock themselves indoors while the hunters scoured the streets, killing every beast they could find. But the hunts grew longer and more frequent. The intervals between them shortened, and slowly, inevitably, some of the hunters themselves began to change. The blood they consumed to enhance their abilities, the blood they were constantly exposed to as they killed beasts, this blood began to corrupt them. Hunters started to transform mid-hunt, becoming the very monsters they had sworn to destroy. Others didn't transform physically, but became blood-drunk, addicted to the violence and carnage, killing not out of duty, but out of sheer bloodlust. It was during this dark period that Gehrman suffered a terrible loss. The exact circumstances are unclear, but Lady Maria died or disappeared. Some say she took her own life, unable to bear the guilt of what she had done at the fishing hamlet. Others believe she was claimed by the hunter's nightmare, pulled into that blood-soaked purgatory to suffer for her sins. Whatever the truth, Maria was gone, and Gehrman was devastated. He created a doll in her likeness, crafting it with the same care and attention he had lavished on Maria's clothing. The doll was perfect in its way, capturing Maria's physical appearance down to the smallest detail. But it had no life, no soul, no spark of the personality that had made Maria special. It sat in Gehrman's workshop, a beautiful but lifeless tribute to lost love. Gehrman's grief and the failures of the hunt drove him to desperation. He was the first hunter, the man who had pioneered the art of killing beasts, and he was failing. The plague was spreading faster than he could contain it. His students were dying or turning into beasts themselves. The Healing Church, seeing the limitations of Gehrman's workshop, founded their own under the leadership of Ludwig, relegating Gehrman to obsolescence. Broken in body and spirit, Gehrman made a decision that would change everything. He possessed one of the umbilical cords, the remnants of a great one's birth. He knew that these cords could be used to contact the cosmic entities that dwelled beyond human perception. In his loneliness and despair, he reached out to the cosmos, and something answered. The being that responded to Gehrman's plea was called the Moon Presence, or Flora, a great one whose true nature remains mysterious. Like all great ones, it had lost its child and sought a surrogate. It offered Gehrman a deal. It would create a dream realm where hunters could train and be sustained, where death would not be permanent, where the hunt could continue forever. In exchange, Gehrman would serve as the host of this dream, guiding hunters and preparing them for their true purpose, a purpose the Moon Presence kept hidden from the old man. Gehrman accepted, perhaps not fully understanding what he was agreeing to. The hunter's dream came into being. The doll, through the power of the Great One, was given a semblance of life, able to move and speak and offer comfort, though she possessed none of Maria's memories or personality. And Gehrman became a prisoner, bound to the dream, unable to leave, forced to watch as hunter after hunter came and went, most of them dying in the waking world, a few completing their missions and earning release. The Moon Presence had its own agenda. It was not helping humanity out of kindness or sympathy. Based on the evidence we see throughout the game, it appears to be using the hunters as weapons against rival Great Ones, particularly Murgo, the stillborn child that Mikolash and the School of Mensis had contacted. By directing hunters to slay other Great Ones and silence Murgo's cry, this interpretation suggests the Moon Presence was eliminating competition, ensuring its own position as the dominant cosmic entity influencing Yharnam. Gehrman came to understand his bondage over time, came to hate his existence in the dream. In his sleep, he would cry out, begging Master Willem and Lawrence to free him, pleading for release from the nightmare he had accepted. But there was no escape. The contract was binding. He was the dream's prisoner until someone could take his place. One of the great mysteries the Healing Church sought to solve was how to prevent ordinary citizens from panicking about the cosmic horrors that had begun manifesting in Yharnam. As the barrier between dimensions weakened, creatures called amygdala, multi-limbed great ones with grotesque faces, began appearing throughout the city. These beings could drive people mad just by being perceived. The solution came from an unexpected source. Rom, the vacuous spider, a former scholar of Bergenwerth who had achieved a unique form of ascension. Rom had been a willing participant in Willem's experiments. She had allowed herself to be transformed, to have her humanity stripped away in pursuit of cosmic knowledge. Through the intervention of Kos, possibly using one of the umbilical cords, Rom achieved a metamorphosis that turned her into something beyond human, beyond even the kin that the Church was creating in its experiments. She became a great one in her own right, or something very close to it. Her body transformed into a massive, slug-like creature with a bulbous head covered in eyes and dozens of spindly legs. She retreated to her own pocket dimension, the Moonside Lake, an endless expanse of shallow water and twinkling stars. But Ram didn't hoard her knowledge or use it for power. Instead, she sacrificed everything to protect humanity from a truth it wasn't ready to face. Ram maintained a veil, a psychic barrier that prevented ordinary humans from perceiving the full horror of the world around them. The amygdala that crawled along the buildings became invisible to those without sufficient insight. The blood moon that hung in the sky, ready to descend and usher in the final phase of the nightmare, was held back by Ram's will alone. She concealed the rituals of the Great Ones, kept Willem and others from accessing the full truth of what lurked beyond reality's thin veneer. Some saw this as wisdom. Others, like the school of Mensis, saw it as betrayal, accusing Ram of hiding the secrets they needed to complete their work. Notes found throughout Yharnam speak of the Byrgenwerth spider with different tones. At the college, a note states, "The spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared," suggesting that Ram's concealment was intentional and perhaps justified. But at Uden Chapel, a note reads, "The Byrgenwerth spider hides all manner of rituals and keeps our lost master from us. A terrible shame. It makes my head shudder uncontrollably, indicating frustration from those who believed the truth should be accessible." Ram herself remained silent in her lake, surrounded by her spider-like children, waiting for the inevitable moment when someone would pierce her veil and unleash the truth upon the world. As the player-hunter progresses through Yharnam, following the trail of blood and madness, key moments mark the journey toward understanding. You defeat Vicar Amelia in the Grand Cathedral and touch a skull on the altar, causing the world to shift from day to night. This is the first sign that reality itself is malleable, that the seemingly solid world of Yharnam is more dreamlike than it appears. You venture through the Forbidden Woods and arrive at Byrgenwerth, where Master Willem still sits in his chair, ancient beyond measure, his eyes covered but still pointing out over the lake. The gesture is both an invitation and a warning. You leap into the Moonside Lake and face Ram. The battle is strange, almost sad. Ram doesn't attack immediately. She seems confused by your aggression, rolling onto her back and kicking her little legs in distress. Her children defend her, spider-like creatures that swarm to protect their mother. Only when sufficiently provoked does Ram fight back, summoning arcane crystals to rain from the sky and bursting from the ground. The battle progresses through phases, Ram teleporting to different areas of the infinite lake, her children constantly respawning to protect her. Eventually, you strike the killing blow, and Ram dies with the same reaching gesture that Gehrman uses, lifting her hands toward the sky as if seeking help that will never come. The moment Ram dies, everything changes. The veil she maintained shatters. The barrier between dimensions collapses. You're transported back to Yahargul, which you may have visited earlier, but now it's completely different. The blood moon hangs low in the sky, bathing everything in crimson light. The amygdala that were previously invisible now crawl across every surface, their grotesque forms unavoidable. In the distance, Queen Yharnam appears, looking up at the descending moon as the cry of an infant echoes across the nightmare. A message appears. Ritual secret broken. Seek the nightmare newborn. The blood moon's descent marks the point of no return. NPCs you've met throughout your journey begin to transform or go mad. Ariana, the friendly woman who gave you her blood, becomes pregnant with a child of the Great Ones, the evidence strongly suggesting this is through the formless Uden's influence. If you've been helping her, you'll find her later in a state of shock, having given birth to something that resembles a cosmic larva. Adela, the nun from Yahar Ghul, becomes jealous and murders Ariana if both are sent to the same safe haven. The beggar you may have rescued reveals himself to be a beast in disguise, having murdered and consumed everyone you tried to save. The world is coming apart, the nightmare bleeding through into waking reality. You press forward, deeper into the horror. You venture to the nightmare frontier and face Amygdala proper, one of the great ones that had been watching over the city. You navigate the treacherous poison swamps and twisted architecture of this nightmare realm. Eventually, you reach the lecture building, and beyond it, the nightmare of Mensis, where Mikolash awaits in his endless corridors. The madman runs from you, forcing you to chase him through an impossible space that defies geometry. When finally cornered, he attacks with cosmic arcane spells, all while ranting about eyes and Kos and the voices he hears in his head. He dies laughing, his final words expressing excitement about the insight he's gaining even in death. Beyond Mikolash lies Murgo's loft, a tower that exists outside normal space. As you climb, you encounter the brain of Mensis, a massive exposed brain covered in eyes that hangs in the void. Looking at it causes frenzy, the madness that comes from perceiving truths the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend. You can kill this brain by cutting it down and finding its physical location in the nightmare of Mensis, granting yourself a rune as reward for this mercy killing. At the top of the loft, you find a nursery, a crib draped in curtains. The crib appears empty, but you can hear the cry of an infant, Murgo's anguished wail, echoing through the nightmare. Guarding the crib is Murgo's wet nurse, a towering entity dressed in black robes with six-bladed arms and no visible face. The wet nurse is likely a great one itself, or a powerful servant of one, tasked with caring for the formless child. The battle takes place in the nursery, the wet nurse teleporting through the fog and creating zones of darkness where it becomes nearly invisible. When you finally defeat it, Murgo's crying stops. The infant has been silenced, its presence in the nightmare ended. A message appears, nightmare slain. You've completed the moon presence's purpose, eliminating the rival Great One's child. You awaken in the hunter's dream to find it burning. The flowers that once filled the garden are ablaze, the sky dark and menacing. Gehrman is waiting for you outside the workshop. This is the moment of choice, the decision that will determine which ending you receive. Gehrman offers to free you from the dream. He speaks gently, almost kindly, explaining that you've done well, that you've hunted enough, that you can wake up and return to the waking world. If you accept his offer, Gehrman stands, revealing that he can walk despite his wheelchair, and approaches you with his burial blade extended. He decapitates you in one swift motion, and you wake up in the streets of Yharnam as the sun rises. The doll bids you farewell, hoping you find your worth in the waking world. This is the Yharnam sunrise ending, escape from the nightmare, but also loss of any cosmic understanding you'd gained. You return to ignorance perhaps for the better. If you refuse Gehrman's offer, his demeanor changes. He's disappointed, but not surprised. He tells you that the night and the dream were long, and that it's time for it to end. Then he attacks, no longer the kindly old man, but the first hunter in his prime. Gehrman wields his burial blade with terrifying skill, his scythe cutting wide arcs through the air. He uses a blunderbuss to interrupt your attacks and quickening techniques to move faster than should be possible for someone of his age. He fights with the desperation of a man who has been imprisoned for longer than he can remember, hoping that death will finally free him from the dream's grasp. When you defeat Gehrman, he reaches toward the sky with the same gesture Ram used, the same gesture Maria uses when you kill her in the DLC. White mist pours from his body as he dies, and for a moment, it seems you've won freedom. But then something descends from the blood moon. The moon presence, a pale, emaciated creature with elongated limbs and ribs visible through translucent skin, lands in the garden. It approaches you slowly, reaching out with skeletal fingers, and then unleashes a scream that drains your health to one point. If you haven't prepared, if you don't have enough insight or haven't consumed the umbilical cords, the moon presence embraces you, and everything fades to black. You wake up in the hunter's dream sometime later, sitting in Gehrman's wheelchair. The doll is there, pushing you back toward the workshop, saying that a new hunt will begin. You've taken Gehrman's place, freed him from his prison, only to become the new host of the dream. This is the Honoring Wishes ending, where you perpetuate the cycle, becoming the next guide for future hunters, bound to serve the moon presence's purposes for eternity. But there's a third possibility. If you've explored thoroughly, if you've gathered 1/3 of umbilical cord items and consumed them before the final battle, you gain a resistance to the moon presence's influence. These cords, remnants of Great One births, grant you insight into the cosmic truth of existence. One cord can be found in the abandoned old workshop where Gehrman once kept his original doll. Another comes from Iosefka's clinic, from the imposter who has been transforming patients into celestial emissaries. A third can be obtained from Ariana after she gives birth to her cosmic child. And a fourth, if you complete the wet nurse encounter, comes from Murgo's loft itself. With 3 cords consumed, when the moon presence tries to embrace you, you resist. The Great One is surprised, perhaps alarmed, that a mere human could withstand its power. It attacks you properly, using arcane magic and physical strikes, testing your worth as a potential equal rather than treating you as a pawn. The battle is challenging, but not impossible. When you finally defeat the moon presence, it collapses, its pale form crumpling to the ground. You stand over it, victorious. And then the transformation begins. Your body twists and changes, but not into a beast. This is a different kind of metamorphosis, an ascension rather than a degradation. You become something new, something that has never existed before, a Great One born from human origins. The doll finds you in this new form, a small, slug-like infant with a head covered in eyes, crying softly in the garden where the moon presence fell. She picks you up gently, cradling you in her arms, and speaks words of comfort. Are you cold? Oh, good hunter. This is the childhood's beginning ending, the only true escape from the cycle. You've transcended humanity entirely, becoming the very thing the Healing Church and Bergenwerth sought to create. But at what cost? You're an infant again, helpless and mewling, with no guarantee that your human consciousness survives in this new form. You've achieved evolution, but lost your humanity in the process. The story doesn't end in the base game, though. The Old Hunters DLC expands on the lore considerably, taking you into the Hunter's Nightmare, that cursed realm the lore connects to the events at the fishing hamlet. You access this nightmare through an amygdala near the Eden Chapel, using the eye of a blood-drunk hunter, an item that marks you as one who has been consumed by the violence of the hunt. The nightmare is a twisted reflection of Yharnam, locations you recognize but warped and wrong. Blood rivers flow through the streets, corpses hang from trees and buildings, and everywhere you look, there are hunters, old hunters who have been trapped here, forced to continue the hunt for eternity. These old hunters are formidable opponents. They wield the same trick weapons you use, fight with the same techniques you've learned, and can quickstep and parry just as well as you can. Some recognize that the hunt has become meaningless, that they're trapped in a cycle of violence with no purpose, but they can't stop themselves from attacking. Others have gone completely mad, lost in bloodlust, seeing everything as a beast to be slaughtered. You fight your way through them, through the twisted streets, and into a cathedral that mirrors the grand cathedral in the waking world. In this nightmare cathedral, you face Ludwig, the Holy Blade, the first hunter to serve the Healing Church and the mentor to countless others. Ludwig was a noble man once, driven by high ideals. He established the Healing Church workshop after Gehrman's became obsolete. He armed the common people with weapons to defend themselves, created the church hunters as a force for good. He wielded the holy moonlight sword, a weapon of cosmic origin that channeled arcane energy. But Ludwig fell, corrupted by the beast blood, transformed into a grotesque creature that was more horse than man, blind and mindless, attacking anything that enters his domain. The battle against Ludwig is one of the DLC's highlights. In his first phase, he's a savage beast, thrashing and biting and vomiting poisonous fluids. His movements are erratic, almost random, reflecting the madness that has consumed his mind. But when you reduce his health to half, something changes. Ludwig's claw scrapes across the ground, and he finds his holy moonlight sword, buried in the filth of the nightmare. The moment he grasps the blade, his posture changes. He stands upright, his blind eyes seeming to see again, and he speaks, recognition flooding back into his voice. "Ah, you were at my side all along, my true mentor, my guiding moonlight." The second phase of the battle is completely different. Ludwig fights with skill and precision, wielding his sword with sweeping arcs of arcane energy. He's beautiful in a terrible way, a reminder of the noble hunter he once was. When you finally kill him, he collapses, and if you're wearing healing church attire, he speaks to you one final time. He asks if the church hunters were honorable, if they're remembered as heroes. How you answer determines his final moments. If you tell him yes, he dies peacefully, believing his legacy intact. If you tell him no, revealing the truth of what the church became, he dies in despair, the last shred of his identity crumbling. Past Ludwig's nightmare, you discover the research hall, a twisted version of the healing church's experiments. The area is a vertical space, a clock tower filled with patients who have been subjected to terrible procedures. Their heads are grotesquely swollen, enlarged by the fluids pumped into their brains in an attempt to force the growth of eyes. Some patients are hostile, attacking you with crude weapons. Others are passive, sitting or standing in place, lost in their own private torments. They speak of Lady Maria, of her kindness, of how she was the only one who treated them with compassion amidst all the horror. You navigate upward through the research hall, raising and lowering water levels, finding keys and unlocking new paths. At the very top, in the Lumenwood Garden, you face the living failures, a group of failed experimental subjects who attack en masse. They're pathetic in their way, shambling creatures with bloated heads and weak bodies. But together, they can overwhelm you with arcane magic that rains from the sky like meteors. Defeating them grants you access to the astral clock tower where Lady Maria waits. Maria sits in a chair, seemingly lifeless, a corpse rather than a living person. But when you approach, she stirs. She rises to her feet, and her eyes open, filled with sorrow and determination. "A corpse should be left well alone," she tells you. "Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will cure you now, liberate you from your wild curiosity." She doesn't want to fight, but she will, to protect the secret that lies beyond her chamber, to ensure that the horrors of the fishing hamlet remain hidden. The battle against Maria is elegant and tragic. She wields her rakuyo with incredible skill, her movements precise and deadly. In her first phase, she fights with pure technique, no blood magic, staying true to the principles she held in life. But as the battle progresses, she begins to use her blood. She cuts her own wrists, letting crimson pour from her veins to coat her blades, giving her attacks additional range and power. In the final phase, she stabs herself in the chest, fully embracing the blood arts she once reviled, using the full extent of her Canehurst heritage. Fire and blood mix in her attacks, her strikes leaving trails of flame and gore. When you finally defeat her, she performs the same reaching gesture, falling as flower petals scatter around her. With her death, the seal on the fishing hamlet is broken. Beyond the clock tower lies the hamlet itself, a nightmare recreation of the village where the Byrgenwerth scholars committed their atrocities. The area is dark and foreboding, filled with shambling corpses and twisted sea creatures. You fight your way through the village, past the parasites that inhabit the corpses, past the fishmen with barnacle-encrusted bodies, until you reach the beach where Kos's corpse still lies, rotting in the surf. Near the corpse stands a lighthouse, and beside it, the orphan of Kos. The orphan is a tragic figure, a great one that was never allowed to be born properly. Based on the circumstances we find at the fishing hamlet and the state of Kos's corpse, it appears the scholars interfered with the natural process, though the exact details remain unclear. The orphan clutches its placenta as a weapon, using it like a club or flail. The creature is fast and aggressive, its attacks wild but devastating. It shrieks and wails, expressing the anguish of its existence through violence. In the second phase, the orphan summons lightning from the sky, its rage intensifying, its movements becoming even more erratic. The battle is exhausting, emotionally and mechanically, forcing you to confront the consequences of the hunters' and scholars' actions. When you finally kill the orphan, something remarkable happens. Instead of dissolving into mist like most bosses, the orphan's spirit rises into the sky, freed from the nightmare. A ghostly image of Kos appears over her corpse, and the orphan's spirit ascends to join her. The curse is lifted. The nightmare begins to fade. Back in the hunter's dream, if you return there, the doll will comment that Gehrman seems to be sleeping soundly for the first time in a long while. This connection, along with other evidence throughout the DLC, suggests Gehrman may have been involved in the events at the fishing hamlet, and the orphan's release has given him a measure of peace. The lore revealed in the DLC recontextualizes everything you thought you knew about the main game. The hunter's nightmare isn't just a punishment for blood-drunk hunters. It's divine retribution for a specific crime, the massacre at the fishing hamlet. Maria's presence in the nightmare makes sense now. She participated in that massacre, and her guilt bound her to this place even after death. Ludwig's fall represents the corruption of the church's ideals, how even the noblest hunter could become a beast. The research hall shows the depths of the church's depravity, the lengths they would go to in pursuit of cosmic knowledge. The Great Ones themselves remain enigmatic throughout Bloodborne, their motivations obscure and their nature fundamentally alien. Eden exists only as a formless voice, never manifesting physically but still capable of impregnating women through the medium of blood. Abrietas seems benevolent, genuinely wanting to help the healing church, yet her blood and the communion with her led directly to the worst experiments. Amygdala appears throughout the game, some hostile and some passive, their true purpose never fully explained. Murgo is an infant that never truly lived, yet its cry sustains an entire nightmare realm. The moon presence appears to orchestrate the hunt from behind the scenes, and based on the game's progression, many interpret its actions as using hunters as weapons against rival Great Ones, yet if defeated, seems almost pitiable in death. The common thread among all Great Ones is their loss. Every Great One has lost its child and yearns for a surrogate. This fundamental tragedy makes them sympathetic to human prayers, willing to answer calls for help or communion. But their attempts to connect with humanity invariably lead to catastrophe. Their blood transforms humans into beasts. Their presence drives people mad. Their children, whether stillborn like Murgo or corrupted like the entities born from Ariana and others, bring only suffering. The Great Ones want connection, want family, want to ease their eternal loneliness, but they're too vast, too alien, too fundamentally different from humanity to achieve this without destroying what they touch. The themes running through Bloodborne are clear, despite the oblique storytelling. The pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, without consideration of consequences, leads to ruin. Master Willem's caution was vindicated. Lawrence's confidence was hubris. The healing church sought to elevate humanity, but instead created the beast plague. Byrgenwerth tried to gain cosmic insight and murdered an entire village. The Great Ones themselves, despite their power, are trapped in cycles of loss and yearning that even transcendence cannot break. Blood is presented as both salvation and damnation, a miracle cure that heals all wounds, but also a transformative poison that strips away humanity. The further you go into Bloodborne's story, the more you realize that the distinction between hunter and beast is not as clear as it first appears. Hunters consume blood to enhance their abilities. They become addicted to the violence of the hunt. They transform, if not into literal beasts, then into blood-drunk killers who have forgotten why they started hunting in the first place. The player character is not immune to this. Your own transformation into a Great One in the childhood's beginning ending is presented as victory, but is it really? You've lost your humanity, become something alien and incomprehensible. You've achieved transcendence, but at the cost of everything that made you human. The cycle of violence perpetuates itself throughout Bloodborne. The Pthumerians discovered the Great Ones and were destroyed. The scholars of Byrgenwerth learned from the Pthumerian ruins and created their own catastrophe. The healing church built upon Byrgenwerth's knowledge and spread the plague to an entire city. Hunters were created to combat the beasts, but hunters themselves became beasts. The hunter's dream was created to sustain the hunt, but it became a prison for Gehrman and a tool for the Moon Presence's agenda. Breaking these cycles is possible, as shown by the multiple endings, but it requires sacrifice. Either you accept ignorance and wake up, losing all your cosmic insight, or you take someone else's place in the prison, or you transcend humanity entirely and become something that can no longer relate to the human condition. The Lovecraftian influences are obvious but used with surprising depth. Bloodborne doesn't just borrow Lovecraft's aesthetics of tentacles and cosmic horror. It engages with his core themes: the insignificance of humanity in an indifferent cosmos, the danger of seeking knowledge beyond mortal comprehension, the thin line between enlightenment and madness. But Bloodborne also adds something Lovecraft rarely explored: sympathy for the cosmic entities. The Great Ones aren't malevolent in Bloodborne. They're tragic figures, powerful but lonely, capable of miracles but cursed with infertility or stillbirths. They reach out to humanity not out of malice, but out of need, and the resulting disasters are as much accidents as deliberate acts. The environmental storytelling reinforces these themes at every turn. Yharnam's architecture speaks of a civilization in decline, grand buildings now stained with blood and occupied by beasts. The Chalice dungeons show the ultimate fate of a civilization that delved too deep into forbidden knowledge. The hunter's nightmare is a hell built from the hunter's own sins, forcing them to confront the consequences of their blood-drunk violence. Even the hunter's dream, which seems safe and beautiful, is revealed to be a gilded cage, a prison disguised as sanctuary. The NPCs you meet throughout the game each represent different responses to the horror of Yharnam's situation. Jura has given up on the hunt, choosing instead to protect the beasts of old Yharnam, recognizing them as the people they once were. Eileen the Crow hunts other hunters, trying to give mercy kills to those who have fallen to blood drunkenness before they can cause more harm. Alfred is consumed by religious zealotry, willing to commit atrocities in the name of the healing church's honor. Ariana simply tries to survive, offering what little she can to those who pass by, until the Blood Moon's descent dooms her to a fate worse than death. Each of these characters shows a different facet of how people respond to cosmic horror: resistance, mercy, fanaticism, resignation. The fact that so much of Bloodborne's story is hidden in item descriptions, environmental details, and optional areas is intentional. Director Hidetaka Miyazaki has spoken about his approach to storytelling, how he wants players to piece together the narrative themselves, filling in gaps with their own interpretations. This approach creates a community of lore enthusiasts, people who share theories and debate meanings, who find connections between seemingly unrelated details. The story of Bloodborne exists as much in the discussions it generates as in the game itself. But even with all this analysis, mysteries remain. What exactly did the scholars do to Kos's corpse that warranted such terrible retribution? Why does the moon presence specifically target Murgo? What is the relationship between the different nightmare realms, and how do they connect to the waking world? What happened to Lawrence after he became the cleric beast, and why does his skull appear in both the waking world and the hunter's nightmare? Some of these questions may never have definitive answers, existing deliberately in the space of uncertainty, where cosmic horror thrives. The genius of Bloodborne lies in how it uses its gameplay to reinforce its narrative themes. The blood vial system, where you heal by injecting more blood, literally makes you dependent on the substance that's causing the plague. The insight mechanic, where gaining knowledge changes how you perceive the world, demonstrates the cost of understanding cosmic truth. The rally system, where you can regain health by immediately attacking after taking damage, encourages aggression and bloodlust, slowly training you to become more like the blood-drunk hunters you were sent to stop. Every mechanical choice serves the story, making you complicit in the cycle of violence and transformation. The endings, too, are perfectly designed to illustrate the central dilemma. There is no good ending in Bloodborne. Each conclusion represents a different kind of failure or sacrifice. Waking up means choosing ignorance, pretending the horror doesn't exist, abandoning the truth you've discovered. Taking Gehrman's place means becoming a servant to forces beyond your control, perpetuating the cycle of hunting and violence. Becoming a great one means achieving transcendence, but losing your humanity, becoming the very thing you've been fighting against. The game refuses to offer a comfortable resolution, instead forcing you to choose which price you're willing to pay. Understanding Bloodborne's story doesn't diminish its horror. If anything, knowing the truth makes it worse. The Healing Church's crimes are more appalling when you understand they were committed by people who believed they were helping humanity. The Beast Plague is more tragic when you realize it was entirely preventable, caused by Lawrence's refusal to heed Willem's warnings. The Hunter's Nightmare is more terrible when you know it was created as punishment for a specific atrocity. And the Great Ones become more pitiable when you understand their loneliness, their desperate attempts to connect with humanity, despite the inevitable catastrophe that follows. The city of Yharnam itself is a character in the story, a place that rose to prominence on the strength of a lie, the promise of miraculous blood healing, and fell into ruin when that lie could no longer be maintained. The architecture tells of aspirations toward enlightenment, the Gothic spires reaching skyward as if trying to touch the cosmos. But those spires are now stained with blood, their beauty corrupted by the horrors they've witnessed. The streets that once teemed with pilgrims seeking cures now host only beasts and blood-drunk hunters. The Grand Cathedral, once a symbol of hope and healing, sits atop a pit where Ebrietas dwells, the cosmic entity whose blood enabled all the Church's crimes. The story of Bloodborne is ultimately about the price of ambition, the cost of transcendence, and the tragedy of good intentions corrupted by pride. It's about humanity's desperate desire to be more than human, to achieve something greater, to touch the divine. And it's about how that desire, no matter how noble its origin, leads to catastrophe when pursued without wisdom or restraint. The Pthumerians sought communion with the Great Ones and were reduced to undead guardians in forgotten tombs. Bergenwerth sought cosmic knowledge and birthed horrors like Rom and the massacres at the fishing hamlet. The Healing Church sought to elevate humanity and instead spread a plague that turned people into beasts. Yet Bloodborne doesn't condemn the pursuit of knowledge entirely. The game rewards exploration, both physical and intellectual. Players who delve deeper, who seek out every item description and hidden area, gain insight, both the mechanical stat and the metaphorical understanding. The childhood's beginning-ending, while unsettling, is presented as an achievement, a true breaking of the cycle. The implication seems to be that seeking knowledge isn't inherently wrong, but it must be pursued with full awareness of the cost, with willingness to sacrifice, and with understanding that some truths will change you irrevocably. The relationship between dreams and reality in Bloodborne adds another layer of complexity. The hunter's dream is explicitly called a dream, yet it has real effects on the waking world. Hunters who die in Yharnam wake up in the dream, then return to the hunt. The dream sustains them, makes them immortal as long as it exists, but it's also a trap, a prison that keeps them bound to the moon presence's will. The hunter's nightmare is also a dream of sorts, a nightmare created by a dying Great One's curse. These dream realms exist somewhere between reality and unreality, solid enough to walk through and fight in, yet obviously not part of the normal world. This blurring of dreams and reality reflects one of Bloodborne's core concepts, that reality itself is more fluid than we believe, that what we perceive as solid and unchanging is actually a fragile construct maintained by things like Ram's veil. When the blood moon descends, you're not just seeing things that were always there. Reality itself is changing, the nightmare bleeding through into the waking world, the barriers between dimensions collapsing. The insight mechanic reinforces this. As you gain insight, you literally begin to see things differently. The amygdala that were always there but invisible become visible. The mad ones appear. The world transforms based on your perception, suggesting that consciousness and reality are more closely intertwined than mundane existence would suggest. The cosmic horror of Bloodborne works because it's personal. This isn't about abstract entities threatening the world from afar. It's about blood you inject into your own veins, about people you know transforming into monsters, about the city you're trying to save revealing itself to be already doomed. The horror is intimate and immediate, even as it's also vast and cosmic. You watch Ariana descend into madness after giving birth to a cosmic larva, her mind shattered by what she's experienced. You see Alfred, the cheerful hunter you met early in the game, covered in gore and lost in religious ecstasy after murdering the vile Blood Queen. You witness ordinary people, desperate and afraid, locking themselves in their homes, knowing that the beasts outside were once their neighbors. This personal horror contrasts with the cosmic scale of the Great Ones and their machinations. The moon presence is orchestrating events on a grand scale, using the entire city of Yharnam as a battleground for its conflict with other Great Ones. Yet your role in this cosmic drama begins with something as simple as seeking a blood transfusion for an unnamed illness. The juxtaposition of the intimate and the cosmic creates a sense of vertigo, the realization that individual human stories are playing out against a backdrop of incomprehensible vastness. The blood itself functions as both literal substance and metaphor throughout Bloodborne. Physically, it's the medium through which the Great One's power manifests. It heals, transforms, corrupts, and connects. It's the church's sacrament, the hunter's sustenance, the beast's inheritance. Blood flows through every aspect of Yharnam's culture, from the blood ministration that first drew pilgrims to the city, to the blood vials hunters consume, to the blood that stains the streets during the hunt. Metaphorically, blood represents heritage, connection, and the transmission of corruption across generations. The vile Blood Queen's blood passed to her descendants. The beast blood spreads from person to person. The old blood of the Great Ones flows down through the ages, corrupting everyone it touches. The Healing Church's doctrine, built around the veneration of blood, is both religion and science, faith and experimentation. This combination reflects the historical moment when modern medicine was emerging from religious and mystical traditions, when the line between healer and holy man was still blurred. The church's members are called clerics, suggesting religious authority, yet they perform experiments and conduct research like scientists. This duality allows the Church to commit atrocities in the name of both spiritual salvation and scientific progress, justifying their actions through both faith and empiricism. If there's a hero in Bloodborne's story, it might be Rom. She achieved the transcendence that everyone else sought, gained the cosmic knowledge that Byrgenwerth and the Church craved, and then used that knowledge not for power, but for protection. The evidence suggests she created, or at the very least maintains, a veil to shield humanity from truths it wasn't ready to face. She maintained that veil, even though it meant isolating herself in a pocket dimension, even though her former colleagues cursed her for hiding the secrets they desired. Her sacrifice was ultimately futile. You pierce the veil and unleash the blood moon regardless, but the intention was noble. She tried to protect humanity from the cost of knowledge, understanding that some truths are too terrible to bear. Lady Maria represents a different kind of heroism, one born of guilt and atonement. She participated in the fishing hamlet massacre, committed atrocities in the name of research and the Church's mission. But unlike others who rationalized their actions or forgot them in the pursuit of further goals, Maria couldn't live with what she'd done. She threw away her weapon and retreated to the research hall, where she tried to show kindness to the patients being experimented upon. Even in the nightmare, trapped by Cass's curse, she continues trying to protect the fishing hamlet's secret, to prevent others from repeating the mistakes she made. Her final fight with you is not motivated by bloodlust or duty, but by a desperate desire to prevent further desecration. Gehrman's tragedy is different still. He was the first hunter, a pioneer who invented the techniques and weapons that would define an entire tradition. He trained some of the greatest hunters in Yharnam's history, but his accomplishments are overshadowed by his failures. His inability to stop the beast plague, his loss of Maria, his imprisonment in the dream. When you meet him, he's a broken man, bound to a service he never wanted, forced to send hunter after hunter to their likely doom. His offer to free you from the dream is both mercy and desperate hope. If you accept, he frees you and remains imprisoned. If you refuse and defeat him, he finds release through death. Either way, his story ends in sacrifice. The Moon Presence is the most enigmatic major character, its motivations never fully explained. We know it created the hunter's dream and bound Gehrman to it. The evidence throughout the game suggests it wants Murgo silenced, which many interpret as an attempt to eliminate a rival Great One's influence. We know it tries to make you its servant or surrogate in the Honoring Wishes ending. But why? What does it gain from this? The most common interpretation is that it's acting out of the same desperate yearning for a child that afflicts all Great Ones, seeking a surrogate while eliminating potential threats. Others believe it's engaged in some cosmic power struggle we can't fully comprehend. The game never definitively answers these questions, leaving the Moon Presence as an inscrutable presence whose actions drive the plot, but whose thoughts remain unknowable. The multiple endings serve different narrative and thematic purposes. Yharnam Sunrise represents escape through ignorance, the choice to wake up and pretend the nightmare never happened. It's the safe ending, where you return to normal life, but it also means abandoning all the insight you've gained, all the cosmic truth you've witnessed. It's choosing comfort over knowledge, safety over understanding. Honoring Wishes represents the perpetuation of cycles, where you take Gehrman's place and become the next host of the dream. You've freed him, but condemned yourself, continuing the Moon Presence's agenda, maintaining the system that creates hunters and sends them to fight and die. Childhood's beginning represents transcendence, the breaking of human limitations, but at the cost of humanity itself. You become a Great One, but you're reduced to an infant, helpless and inarticulate. Your human consciousness potentially lost in the transformation. None of these endings is clearly better than the others. Each represents a different kind of victory and a different kind of defeat. This ambiguity is central to Bloodborne's philosophy. There are no easy answers, no simple solutions. Every choice has consequences, every action a price. The game refuses to offer moral clarity or comfortable resolution, instead presenting difficult decisions with no right answer. The environmental design reinforces the narrative at every level. Central Yharnam shows a city in the early stages of collapse, where some semblance of order remains, but beast transformations are accelerating. The Cathedral Ward represents the healing church's power and grandeur, but also hints at the corruption beneath the surface. Old Yharnam is a warning of what happens when the beast plague is allowed to spread unchecked, the entire district burned and abandoned. Yahargul reveals the school of Mensis's twisted experiments. The Nightmare Frontier and Nightmare of Mensis show reality itself breaking down under the weight of cosmic intrusion. Each area tells part of the story through its architecture, enemy placement, and visual design. The Chalice dungeons, often dismissed as optional endgame content, are actually crucial to understanding the full scope of Bloodborne's narrative. These procedurally generated labyrinths beneath Yharnam are the ruins of the Pthumerian civilization, proof that the tragedy playing out in Yharnam is not unique, but part of a cycle that has repeated before. The Pthumerians discovered the Great Ones, harvested their blood, fell to the beast plague, and sealed themselves in their tombs. Now, Yharnam is repeating this pattern, following the same path toward destruction. The Chalice dungeons serve as both warning and prophecy, showing Yharnam's likely fate if the cycle continues unbroken. Queen Yharnam herself appears throughout the game as a spectral figure, usually at significant moments of transition. She's seen after you defeat Rom, looking up at the descending blood moon. She appears in the Chalice dungeons, guarding the deepest secrets of the Pthumerian civilization. She's not hostile unless you attack her, instead seeming to be searching for something, presumably her lost child, Murgo. Her presence connects the ancient past to the present, reminding us that the events of the game are part of a much longer story. The symbolism throughout Bloodborne is dense and layered. Eyes represent insight, cosmic knowledge, the ability to perceive truth. The recurring motif of eyes appearing where they shouldn't be, in brains, on internal organs, covering entire bodies, shows the physical cost of gaining that knowledge. Flowers, particularly the lumen flowers that grow in places touched by the cosmos, represent beauty emerging from horror, the way even the worst atrocities can produce something strangely lovely. The moon, always present in the sky, represents the Great One's influence, their constant watch over humanity's struggles. The color palette shifts throughout the game, reflecting narrative progression. Early areas use purples and blues, creating a gothic horror atmosphere. After Rom's death, reds and oranges dominate, the blood moon bathing everything in crimson light. The hunter's dream uses whites and soft colors, creating a false sense of safety and peace. The hunter's nightmare is drenched in dark reds and blacks, all blood and shadows. These color choices aren't just aesthetic. They guide the player's emotional journey through the story. The music reinforces the narrative as well. The boss themes vary wildly in style, from the aggressive strings of Cleric Beast to the mournful choir of Ebrietas, to the frantic cacophony of Murgo's Wet Nurse. Each soundtrack tells you something about the boss you're fighting, their tragedy or madness or cosmic nature. The hunter's dream theme is peaceful and melancholic, creating a false sense of comfort that the lore subverts. The blood moon theme is ominous and overwhelming, reflecting the breaking of reality's barriers. If Bloodborne has a central message, it might be this: the pursuit of transcendence, while not inherently wrong, must be undertaken with full awareness of its costs. The healing church, Byrgenwerth, the school of Mensis, all of them sought to elevate humanity, to achieve something greater. Their mistake wasn't in trying, but in refusing to acknowledge or accept the price of success. They experimented on unwilling subjects, committed massacres, spread plagues, all while telling themselves it was for the greater good. They pursued knowledge without wisdom, power without responsibility, transcendence without understanding. The player character, by contrast, has the opportunity to make an informed choice. By the time you face the final decision, you've seen the consequences of unchecked ambition. You've witnessed the beast plague, the failed experiments, the nightmares created by cosmic interference. If you choose to become a great one, you do so knowing what it means, accepting the cost willingly. This doesn't make the choice right or wrong, but it makes it honest, informed by experience rather than blind hope. Bloodborne's story is mesmerizing because it rewards attention and thought. Every item description, every environmental detail, every line of NPC dialogue adds to the larger picture. The game trusts its audience to piece together the narrative, to draw connections, to infer what isn't explicitly stated. This creates an active, rather than passive relationship with the story. You're not just being told what happened. You're discovering it, uncovering the truth layer by layer. The tragedy at the heart of Bloodborne is that everyone involved had understandable motivations. Lawrence wanted to help people, to cure disease and extend life. Gehrman wanted to protect Yharnam from the beasts. Maria wanted to advance knowledge and serve her teacher. The Healing Church wanted to elevate humanity. Even the Great Ones, alien and inscrutable as they are, seem to be acting out of loneliness and loss rather than malice. But good intentions paved the road to Yharnam's ruin. Every decision made sense at the time, and every decision led to catastrophe. This is what makes Bloodborne's story so powerful. It's not a simple tale of good versus evil. It's a complex tragedy about how civilizations fall, how noble goals become corrupted, how the pursuit of knowledge can lead to madness, and how even gods can be victims of circumstance. The game asks difficult questions and refuses to provide easy answers. What price is acceptable for transcendence? Is ignorance sometimes preferable to knowledge? Can cycles of violence ever truly be broken? Should humanity accept its limitations or strive to exceed them despite the risks? These questions linger long after you've put down the controller, long after you've seen all three endings and explored every corner of Yharnam. The story of Bloodborne stays with you, its mysteries inviting endless speculation and discussion. The community that has formed around the game's lore is a testament to the depth and richness of its storytelling, proof that Hidetaka Miyazaki and his team crafted something special, a narrative that works on multiple levels and rewards repeated examination. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into Bloodborne's story, if this exploration of Yharnam's darkest secrets has intrigued you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There's so much more to discuss, so many theories to explore, so many connections to draw between items and locations and characters. The hunt for understanding is endless, much like the hunt in the game itself. And just like the hunters of Yharnam, we're driven by a terrible curiosity, a need to know, even when that knowledge comes at a cost. May the good blood guide your way, and may you find your worth in the waking world.